Welcome back to The Explainer. So glad you're here because today we are diving into a really fascinating dynamic that's basically hiding right in plain sight. We're looking at the hidden trade-off between cash bounties and ecological care. As a society, we've come up with some incredible systems to manage our waste, but as we're going to see, the solutions we've engineered might actually be changing human nature in ways we completely failed to predict. Let's get right into it.
Okay, be completely honest with yourself for a second. You're out on your morning walk, and you're faced with two options. Option A, stopping to pick up a dirty, completely valueless plastic wrapper for absolutely free. Or option B, taking a tiny little detour to grab a clean, high-yield bottle that you can immediately cash in for a quick dime. It seems like a total no-brainer, everyday decision, right? Well, that exact choice is actually sitting at the center of a massive modern dilemma.
Which brings us to Section 1, Cash versus Care, and the rise of gamified environmentalism.
So, we're currently caught in this intense tug of war between doing something for the ecosystem and doing something for our wallets. The foundation of this whole shift is a policy called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR for short. Now, basically, EPR is this massive approach that shifts the heavy cost of post-consumer waste away from local governments and the public and pushes it right back onto the producers. And to make this work, we've transformed our municipal landscapes by introducing these highly gamified, incentive-driven setups, like those automated container deposit schemes you see everywhere.
And honestly, the human element that this policy creates is what's truly wild. Thanks to these recycling networks, we're seeing the rise of what researchers are calling decentralized civic maintainers. That's really just a fancy way of describing everyday citizens who are using these schemes to offset their own living costs, or even fund grassroots campaigns. It's a totally new economic framework. But it creates some major local friction, because it essentially turns ordinary folks into literal bounty hunters who systematically harvest only the items that have a cash value attached to them.
And that leaves us with a pretty stark reality on the ground. Take a look at this list of what gets left behind. People are systematically gathering up the highly visible structural items, the ones with the bounty, but they're completely bypassing the non-bounty ecological hazards. Soft single-use wrappings, plastic caps, blocks of synthetic fiber. These are just left sitting on our public paths. It really exposes the absolute limits of relying entirely on market incentives for ecological care. Because at the end of the day, the market only cleans up what the market values.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the unseen threat and the microplastic fragmentation cascade. We really need to establish the severe biological stakes of all that unmonetized plastic we're just leaving behind. This cascade process is terrifyingly efficient. Step 1, the macroplastic litter, like those wrappers and caps we just talked about, gets left in the environment simply because it doesn't pay out a bounty. Step 2, it sits there and degrades through mechanical weathering and UV radiation from the sun. Step 3, it breaks down into highly toxic micro and nanoparticles. And finally, Step 4, permanent entry into local hydrologic and biological systems. There's literally no going back from that. It perfectly illustrates the unseen, permanent consequences of prioritizing cash bounty bottles over valueless fragments. We've got a global crisis of biological accumulation, and local bounty hunters are just walking right past the source of it.
Which tees up Section 3 perfectly, the psychology of bounties and the economics of our behavior.
So, why exactly do we do this? Well, it all boils down to a core psychological tension between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when you do something just for its inherent moral value. Doing it simply because it's the right thing to do to protect the planet. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is performing an action specifically to claim an external reward, doing it because it pays. And right now, the tug of war between those two forces is dictating the health of our public spaces.
Tying right into that, we run into a heavy but absolutely crucial academic concept, the motivation crowding out effect. This is a phenomenon where introducing an explicit monetary incentive for a good deed inadvertently erodes and replaces a person's original altruistic drive. Actually, wait, think about what that really means for a second. By paying people to recycle, we might accidentally be destroying their natural intrinsic urge to just protect the earth. The financial reward literally crowds out the pure moral desire to do good. Crazy, right?
Let's look at Section 4, the circus paradox. It's a brilliant metaphor for unseen degradation. To really wrap our heads around this complex psychology, researchers use a pretty striking historical metaphor to show how incentive-driven design actually operates. Imagine a beautiful, highly visible public gathering place, a town square.
Now, imagine it suddenly gets overrun by a flock of wild, territorial birds, creating an absolute mess. The circus paradox states that the immediate institutional response is usually to offer the spectators a localized cash reward for clearing very specific, predictable fragments of debris. It's a quick fix, powered entirely by extrinsic motivation. But look at the outcome of this paradox. The highly traversable center corridors, they get aesthetically cleared out and instantly restored by the cash bounties. The money successfully mobilizes the crowd perfectly in the visible center. But check out the deep historic cracks in the surrounding architecture. They are left completely vulnerable to compounding long-term structural degradation. Nobody addresses them because cleaning those cracks lacks an assigned economic value. This metaphor hits the nail on the head for our plastic problem. The bounty gets the big, obvious bottles out of the center walkway, for sure. But the highly toxic, unmonetized wrappers, they just keep compounding quietly in the dark corners.
And that brings us to Section 5, our final section, the future of stewardship and the pragmatic leverage debate.
We really have to zoom out to the societal level here and weigh the scalability of how we deploy human effort. It comes down to comparing two distinct paths. Look at Strategy 1. A single volunteer effort laboriously cleaning up a localized patch of single-use soft plastic for zero pay. The outcome is the pure targeted mitigation of a highly toxic ecological hazard. Now compare that to Strategy 2, systematic harvesting, collecting high-yield containers specifically to build an advertising fund. The outcome there is projecting broad wellness and resilience messages to an audience of thousands. So what's the right call? Is it better to manually clean a tiny, highly toxic area for free? Or is it actually a superior deployment of human capital to harness the bounty system to fund massive systemic outreach?
But as we try to answer that, we face a very real danger regarding the erosion of pure stewardship. If our shared public spaces become entirely dependent on a structural cash buffer, what happens when that economic incentive inevitably changes, drops, or just disappears entirely? Does financializing environmentalism accidentally train the public brain to believe that unrewarded care simply isn't worth the physical effort? Which leaves us with this final, profound philosophical cliffhanger. If we systematically design a world where human beings only step forward to heal their immediate environment when a machine spits out a monetary reward, have we engineered a highly efficient, self-sustaining ecosystem of mutual benefit, or have we fully financialized our poor humanity, corroding the sacred, uncompensated duty to simply care for the ground we walk on? I'll let you read that one more time and really let it sink in. It completely challenges our baseline assumptions about our moral responsibilities to the earth. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it sparks some serious curiosity, and I will catch you next time.